It's new. It's scary. Oh my God. We're going to ruin this next generation of people again.
It'll take our jobs.
Yeah.
What would happen if we just told the truth?
Welcome to TruthWorks, where we dig into the nitty-gritty of leadership and work.
And what needs to change? I'm Jessica Neal.
And I'm Patty McCord.
Our journey together started in HR, but trust us, it's evolved into something wild, honest, and a bit rebellious.
So throw out the handbook. We're here to redefine rules to work for us, not against us.
Let's dive into another episode.
I'm going to jump right into why don't you guys tell us about yourself? So, Patty, obviously, claim to fame, Netflix, but you had a life before that. So,
and I have a life after it.
You do, right?
I've been gone
a long
time now. It's funny. I know that one of your questions is what's not on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
And I haven't looked at myself on Wikipedia recently. And it's like, it's as if I was born, met Reed, started at Netflix, died.
Yeah.
And then Jessica and I got back together, and it's all been nothing since then. I started out my career as a recruiter, like Jess, and
I'm sorry.
Oh no, it's a great job. It was at the time that I started doing it. We were kind of we were the whores of HR, right? Like it's like, oh, you're a headhunter, you're a recruiter, you're not really in HR. So I started in pretty big companies. The first company I worked at in tech was Seagate, because I live in Santa Cruz, and it was 100 and something, 200,000 people globally. Yeah. Then I went to Sun Microsystems, and it was about 100,000 people. But Sun was technically pretty small back then. And it was really cool because there I got to work on really high-powered computers. And after that, I went to a smaller company that was a software company in Scotts Valley. I live in Santa Cruz. And it was Borland, which made like Microsoft tool. But I remember the first day. So I'm last hired. So my cubicle is in front of the men's room. And I had those of you, nobody's old enough to remember, I had a 386 standalone computer on my desk. And I said to somebody, hey, can you send me that in soft copy? And they said, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, could you send me a file? And they said, oh yeah, I'll be right over. And they handed me a floppy disk. I was like, hey, thanks. I just didn't know what to do with it. So that company kind of imploded. And one of the VPs that I worked with his choice was to either teach at Harvard or go to a startup. And he went to this startup because he really liked the founder. So he went to this company with Reed. Okay. And I called him about something, and I said, how's your new HR person? He's like, they're an idiot. We fired him. I'm like, well, you should hire me. He said, I won't, because I told the CEO of Borland I would never. You told me if I stole anybody from the company, you'd kill me. You'd break both my legs. I said, no, I didn't. Anyway, so I called Reed back and said, you should know me. And that's how I met Reed.
Got it.
So that was at a company before Netflix. It was called Pure Software.
Right.
It's a software tools company. And then he made a bunch of money and invested a bunch of startups, and I was consulting. And then he called me and said, I'm going to go work at this little company called Netflix. And he said, I want you to come too. And I said, absolutely not. That's the dumbest idea I've ever heard in my life.
And here you are.
And here I am.
Jessica also started as a recruiter.
I did. I started out as a headhunter, but I was going to be an artist. That was the plan. Right. And I wanted to be a painter, and I'd gone to art school in New York, and my dad said I'd never make any money. And
dads are great like that.
Yeah, and he was right. It was really hard to make money as an artist. But then I moved to San Francisco, and I was working in an art gallery, and somehow, long story short, got promoted to manage the art gallery. As manager, I had to sell the art, and I became the top salesperson out of all 5
So you were
galleries.
making money in art.
I was.
Up yours,
right,
Dad.
but not my
all
art. Right. The owner of the gallery was interesting man, and created quite a toxic work environment. And so I ended up deciding to leave. And I applied because I was good at sales. I applied to this entry-level sales job, and it was headhunting. And I ended up being very good at it. And that's how I met Patty and Netflix, because they used me as a headhunter, and they asked me to come in and run recruiting. And I said no a bunch because that's not what I did. I wasn't,
I didn't want to
wasn't
go
a recruiting
inside.
whore like Patty. And I was a business person. So I said no a bunch, but then I ended up saying yes. And the reason why I said yes was because they thought about things so uniquely compared to all my other clients. They got the talent was the most important thing that we did. They didn't worry about the silly stuff. And they were
And we
the smartest
called her
people.
at midnight in Barcelona.
Well, you did pay me well, which was nice, but I was worth it.
That's right.
Good recruiting practices. Yeah.
You know,
So-
but to play on that a little bit, I think part of the reason that allowed us to be the people we turned out to be, we were just making fun of people because our names are always ridiculous. Anyway, when you're a recruiter, and especially if you're good like Jessica was, where people will keep following them, or you're internal like I was, where you live with the people that you hire, you really do get the whole talent part, right? I mean, it really is about finding the right person. And the other thing that Jessica and I have talked about a ton between us is part of the reason I think we were both really good recruiters is because we just really love what people do. Like, you know, I did a talk like this with like 600, it was at Glassdoor, somebody here was from Glassdoor, and it was 600 recruiters in the room or something. I said, how many of you guys, hire engineers, software engineers? 600 hands went up. And I'm like, how many of you have sat next to an engineer while they write code? And nobody, I mean, literally nobody had.
Yeah.
And that's the part I loved.
That's the part we both love. And we were like, how'd you do that?
Yeah.
Show me how you did that.
Yeah, right.
And I didn't still understand. But but when you look at like what people do and they put their passion around, I just get so much joy out of learning from other people and seeing other people do things that we all thought were going to be impossible.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess kind of jumping to the Netflix story. So the culture deck, everyone's heard of it. But yeah,
I wrote it personally. I had a dream one night and I woke up and I wrote,
the vision.
yeah,
All
the
right.
vision, right? We rewrote our values 6 times in the time I was there. Reed said to me, let's have an offsite with all the executive team and write our values. I'm like, let's not. How about if we create a product that somebody will buy first? Just crazy. He called me crazy. And I didn't want to do it. It just seemed so esoteric. I'm like, we're just going to waste a whole day, wordsmithing some value statement. I said, but what if we wrote down what we want people to actually do? What if we wrote down behaviors instead of esoteric aspirational values? One of the things we wrote down, we wordsmithed, but it was really like, we don't really want stupid people was kind of, Reed and I talked about that. And I'm like, that's not going to fly. And then we changed it to like intelligence. And then over time, we realized that it wasn't IQ, it was EQ too. And so when we wrote it as behaviors, it gave us a script to give to new employees and say, here's what you can expect from us, and to each other as leaders, like, this is what we expect from each other. The document took us 10 years to write. Years. Okay. And we wrote it. If you ever go back and look at the original PowerPoint presentation, every chapter is built on the chapter before. So we couldn't have freedom and responsibility unless we had high talent density, which was the high performance part, right? We couldn't rethink compensation unless we rethought everything else. We couldn't say it's like a sports team unless we actually treated it like a sports team. And so Reed and I would usually brainstorm. We'd go through with a couple of other execs, then we'd go through with our management team, then we'd go through with the rest of the company. And I remember a VP one time saying to me, at one point I had said, it's perfectly okay to interview with other people. In fact, we encourage you to do that. And one of our VPs said, well, I don't think you guys realize that if you force all the employees to interview somewhere else, nobody will be working. And I'm like, call me crazy, but I've been walking through the building and people appear to be working. And by the way, we didn't make anybody do it. It's a PowerPoint document. Like, do you hate the idea or do you hate the way it's worded? Because I think you hate the idea, right? You think it's disloyal. Oh, no, I'm totally on board. And I said, great, just send me what you want it to say and we'll check. I mean, it's a PowerPoint document. But the point for you guys all to know is that no one person ever wrote that. I said to Reed one time, like, how many hours do you think you and I spent on that? He's like, us?
Yeah.
Like, it's thousands if you consider everybody that's put in. And you guys did it after I left.
Yeah, multiple times.
Multiple times.
Was there a plan to publish it, or you said it took 10 years and then
No,
it
plan,
came
the
out?
plan was this. The plan was this, that Reed and I at our company before had screwed everything up so badly that I was like, when he called me in the middle of the night, I'm like, give me one good reason I should go do another startup with you, which is the dumbest idea I've ever heard. DVDs in the mail, right? And he said, what if we created the company we always wanted to work at? I was like, oh, now I'm awake. And so we felt like we had to write it down. We felt like if we didn't write it down, we wouldn't hold each other accountable. And at that point, I had been so software engineer in my brain. It was like, well, you got to document your code, right? If this is the code we're going to live by.
Yeah, but I think when we published it, which this was my mistake, Reed was like, the idea was we didn't know it would go viral, but we wanted it to weed the people we didn't want out.
Yeah,
right?
no.
Yeah.
The story. Reed says to me in the car, we're carpooling on the way into work, hey, I met this woman last night who has this really cool company. It's called SlideShare. And they're putting PowerPoint presentations online. I'm like, God damn it, that's a good idea. I wish I had thought of that. Wonder what people are going to put out. He's like, well, I put out the deck yesterday.
No, he made me put it out.
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
No,
That's right.
under my email. Super awesome.
Yeah, right. And then I'm like, oh my God, you're going to scare away all our candidates. Because it was the original document was pretty edgy.
Yeah.
And
Average performance, nice severance package.
Yeah, that's right. And he said, only the ones we don't want.
Yeah, but it was actually very good because we did that in the interviewing process. Like everybody had to read it. And there were people that would drop out. They're like, no. That's too unsafe. That's,
Or they didn't read
These are
it.
the no stupid people and they're like, oh, I'm out.
Right. Well,
Or they were like,
They just didn't like what it said.
It allowed us to have, and for those of you that have spent time on documents like this, it allows you to have conversations about the stuff. The last panel talked a lot about interviewing, about the stuff you really want to know. You really want to know what kind of boss makes you crazy. You really want to know if having sole ownership of what you produce is okay with you. Yeah. Because most of us are brought up or come up through the ranks going, oh, my boss told me, right? I mean, we just didn't tolerate that stuff. And so it allowed us to interview for really different skill sets other than just technical. Yeah.
And it was our code. I mean, it was how we worked. It was how we made decisions. It's how we got alignment. It was, how we decided who was in charge. I mean, it was our operating model. And, for us, we were obsessed with operational excellence. And it was like if we were consensus, if we were too slow, if we were, dragging our feet, like competition would beat us. And at the end of the day, I mean, it was part of why we won.
Yeah, and when we would, and like somebody said, when do you change it? We were talking about that earlier. So first of all, we talked about culture a lot. We talked about it as much as we talked about probably anything else. It made some of our executives crazy. Our first CFO was like, oh my God, are we going to do another sign about culture? I'm like, yeah, because you're bordering on asshole, moving from like intolerant to jerk here. And so but what we would do is, for example, we'd take those behavioral values and we would say, integrity and honesty. Jessica, somebody on your team that's demonstrated that in the last week, give us this example. And if you couldn't, and nobody else could, we would say, is that still important? Is it still real? If it's we think it's important, but it's not real, then what in the system makes that so. And so it was it was kind of a test for us forever, still is.
But I think that that's a very good point that I want people to hear is that we spent just as much time, if not more, on how we worked together
As what the
we
work
did the
was.
business. And I think companies that are willing to do that, you have a much greater chance at these things actually codifying and becoming real, because you all know it's important and you make a decision together as a team that you're going to do this, and then you walk out of the room and you start doing it, right? And we did that all the time. And one asset that we did have is that, Reed was the first one to walk out of the room, start doing it. If it was, we said, okay, well, we're not being great at being a feedback culture, then, in every meeting you had with him.
Then he would walk out of the room and meet with all of your employees.
Yeah, and say, give me feedback, But I mean, it's a better
and then
problem
the next
to have
day
than
he would
not.
come in and say, guess what they said about you.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I heard the last panel talk about is scaling. I want to just make a comment about that and about the CEO approving every interview. I interviewed everybody as a final interview until I couldn't do it anymore.
Then it was me.
And then it was you. No, but then we started realizing that our job was not to run it up, but was to create. Like when I left the company, there were people who were like, when you leave, it'll all be over. The culture you created will be gone. Without you, it'll be nothing. I'm like, that is completely not true, because there are disciples all over this company and they don't need me. And we learned to be able to say when particularly a new manager would come in and say, how do I think about getting rid of somebody? I need HR. Hi, you're HR. I'd like to do some team building. And I would say, great. That's why we hired you. Go build a team. You may want to talk to a recruiter. I'm like, you want to do trust falls? I don't think so. But often what we would do is say, talk to John. He's really good at that. He's had a similar situation when he started here. Talk to him about it. Talk to Susan, because she's done a lot of, she's hired a lot of people that she wished she hadn't, and talk to her about what she learned about that. So creating those leaders, demonstrating, creating, that's how it scales.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it scales. You can't keep going.
Right.
For one thing, if you keep going to the top, then your CEO gets so weird, because they have those weird skip level interviews with somebody and they come back and go, it's all falling apart. It's like, no, he had a bad day.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they have those.
They do. Well, and I guess, it's interesting that you publish it, it becomes so viral, right? And then you probably look at it and say, again, this is the culture we built. These are like common sense, and maybe not common practice. I think somebody said that on one of your podcasts. But just why do you think, honestly, it was so unique, and even from an HR perspective?
Because it was common sense.
Yeah.
And because so many of our team, when I was there, were technical. And, you guys work with software engineers. It's good or bad. It's right or wrong. It's black or white. It's
very binary.
Yeah, it's completely, it's 0 or 1. It's digital, right? And so being straightforward was, I could say to them, they'd say, what's our policy on this? And I would say, I don't know. You seem to be an intelligent person. What do you think we should do in this situation? Do I look like your mother? Right. Right. And what would you do in this situation? And so when I wrote my book because after I left Netflix, I consulted with lots and lots of startups. I did Warby Parker and Peloton and a bunch of little companies when they were little. And they would slap the culture deck on the table and say, we want to do this. And I would say, well, it took us 10 years. You want to get started? And we didn't mean it as a Bible. We meant it as an onboarding document as much as anything else. This is what you can expect from us. So when I wrote the book, I wrote it as the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Netflix Culture Deck.
Yeah.
Like, how do you really operationalize it? And that was our job as CHROs. Our job was to operationalize those things,
Yeah, make it a
not
product.
to do HR.
Yeah, not to do HR. And I think that's the other thing is like, I think companies get really confused and make things a lot more complicated than they need to be. And we were more practical. And I think clarity was king. It's like if people understand the deal and and they understand expectations, they know what we expect, like that's like half the battle. And I go to these companies and I advise now, and if you go down a few layers, you get like, you ask like, oh, what are the 3 most important things for the company? And you get totally different answers from
Revenue.
the new,
right.
or they don't know. And so I think, we were just very good at simplifying and getting down to what was most important and being very clear on how to get there.
Yeah, the other thing
the
I've
business.
learned from the years I've spent outside of Netflix and talking to groups like yours, and I didn't realize it when I was doing it, right? I mean, so hindsight's 2020. Here's the most important thing you can do if you're an CHRO or people leader in your company. Throw shit away. If you're doing something because you've always doing it or because everybody else is doing it, and you can't go up to your geekiest engineer and explain why in one sentence, stop. Right? And I learned that I used to say I was the product manager for people, right? There's a whole chapter in my book. Let's say we think performance feedback is a good idea. It might result in better performance. Most of us think that. I always say, I'll go into a meeting at Netflix and go on the whiteboard and go, I got an idea. Okay, once a year in writing, we're going to look back over the entire last year and tell you something you probably could have done better that we didn't tell you then because we were saving it for your annual performance review, and you kept doing it. It was really bad, and we'd like you to not do that again. And then we would take all that feedback and we'd decide what to pay you next year. Right? And the people in the room would
when
be
you
like,
say it like that.
yeah, I would be like, well, that's a stupid idea. Now, to be fair, I still haven't gotten the performance review part right, but at least I knew that wasn't the best idea.
Yeah. No, I guess we can go down a rat hole on
It's a fun rabbit
No, but
hole.
it's a good example of like that's sacrosanct. I mean, right? Isn't the good HR person supposed to be
Well, I know,
good
and
at
it's I don't know, I get so emotional about these things. But I was just talking to a CEO the other day, and they just did their performance review, and he's like, "Oh, it told me like 85% of the company is high performing." He's like, "I just know that's not true." He's like, "There's no way it's true." So I think that there's a lot of well-meaning, well-intended things that we are doing, and we're moving so fast, and there's all the reactive work that comes with what we do with the org changes and the terminations, and then you're trying to be strategic and run these projects, and then you have everybody in the company that thinks that they understand how to do your job better than you. And but I think I don't know, I think that there's that time for reflection and thinking about the things that are actually going to move the needle. And I always thought about it as like, my job was to be the chief effectiveness officer. It's like, how do I make the company more effective? And if these things are not, then they got to go.
Yeah, and exactly. I love you.
I love you.
And half of half of that work is just getting shit out of the way, right? Like we're gonna my CFO. We go public. I just emailed you the approval plan for approving money for people, individual contributors, and the maximum is 5,000, and then it has to have somebody in finance to approve it, and blah 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 blah. Right? Because everybody's got one of those approval processes. Is it in the budget or isn't it in the budget? Right? And I'm thinking, oh yeah, I want that $500,000 PhD mathematician that I just hired to spend some of her brain power figuring out how to fuck with the finance people. Because that's what they're going to do. They're going to say, they're going to put in 3 invoices for $4,999 to get around it. I mean, it's like, no. But that's an example. It took 5 years to replace the people in finance whose job it was to approve. By the way, their power comes from saying no.
Right.
Right? So they don't go home and go, yeah, that engineer came in. I said, go ahead. And they're like, that guy came in. I told them, $5,000 was the mark and you're not going against it, right? But it took 5 years to replace those people with people who could sit in on the staff meetings with the engineering team and say, hey, by the way, we budgeted for $5,000 a person. Our run rate's 7.5. What did we not anticipate? What do we really want to make it different? How do we want to think about
they
that?
were the strategic partner, not the no person.
Not the no person.
Not the,
but now we're mucking around in finance.
Yeah.
Right? Is that an HR job? It's an effectiveness job.
Yep.
Yeah. So at what point then in a company's growth or life cycle does it all just go sideways and everybody forgets they're running a
Always.
business?
Every day.
Every day. I mean, come on. Like, I always you probably get this all the time too. We still get on our podcast like, who's an example of somebody that's doing it right? When the pandemic happened, Patty, who do you think has the best practices on working from home? I'm like, fucking nobody.
Nobody.
We're all making
Who's
it
really
up.
figured out the future of work? The wizard and the that has the thing.
We
I don't know.
were just whispering in the background, like AI. What about when we lived
Monorail.
Yeah, run rate, cloud. It's all about the cloud. No,
How about the data science?
data science.
Data science.
You know, we don't know.
I just did a podcast with somebody else about AI. I'm like, get over it. It's gonna be fine.
Yeah, chill out.
It's new. It's scary. Oh my God. We're going to ruin this next generation of people again.
It'll take our jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, when we're all plugged into the matrix,
not
we won't
sticking
notice.
to your questions,
So,
are we?
no.
We had
I don't have any
about
really.
that.
Well, I don't think
this is
Peter
good.
expected us to. I mean, he knew what he was getting into.
I really have nothing. This was ChatGPT. I just
Oh, good.
it came up with random things.
Utilizing AI. That's good.
This is we're wild and honest.
Yeah, but no, I mean, I think our answer really matters to you. You're never going to figure it out.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you from my experience, as soon as that day you walk in and go, figured that one out, you're wrong again. Right? Because so here's the other thing that happens when you scale. When you scale, okay, the first problems of a startup are problems of difficulty, right? And so how you solve problems of difficulty is you hire the smartest people that you can afford to hire, and you work hard, right? Because solving those problems is like, and the whiteboard, if you don't use whiteboards, the Slack channels are not full of like, there's the answer. It's like, not that. Because you are literally inventing something new. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
Right. So nobody knows the right answer because you're making shit up.
You're
right?
making it up.
And then if you get to problems of scale, your first problems are difficulty. Now you're at problems of scale and breadth. Now it's kind of helpful to have a couple of people around that have seen 100x. Because I think that people can imagine maybe 10. But 50, but 100. And then you've got to reprogram those people because they tend to come from larger, more established companies that have a lot more rules and process. And what we found, was that those people read the culture deck like, I have died and I want to be here. I want to be here. I want to be here. And they're the same ones that would walk into our offices and go, let's do trust falls.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I think the deprogramming was really
the hard part.
It was hard, but it was really important because because we were making it up as we go along, we didn't hire a lot of junior people because they hadn't seen 10x of what where we were, and so we hired pretty senior people, and they came with 10 to 15 years of experience, and at Microsoft, at Google, at wherever. And this was such a foreign place because we really were asking them to like be an entrepreneur and make decisions and run teams and not have rules. And, they just, that's all they knew. Right. So it wasn't that it was bad, but we just had to teach them differently. Like, okay, yeah, like you get to actually make the decision on budget.
Or like we were whispering, we were shispering.
You probably heard us.
Shispering's
We
my
can't
word,
help it.
Like talking shit and whisper. Like, what were we shispering about?
Which
Lost
part?
my train of thought. Oh, about who makes the decisions about recruiting. And I was saying, the problem, we were talking about the hot stove.
Yeah.
It's like, particularly with new managers, you can still be in the interview loop. And I could say, they say, you love that guy, Patty, you love that guy. Wasn't he great? I'm like, I loved him. He was I want to have a beer with this guy tomorrow afternoon. He isn't qualified. Just, that's okay. We'll all help him and we love him. We're going to help him come up to speed. I'm like, well, there's a great ROI for the company, isn't it? We're going to hire this person and we're going to take some of each of your jobs to help him become competent for the job we're hiring him for today that he won't be until you. But you know what?
Well, when
Your
you say
call.
it like that.
Yeah.
No, but I'm like, or like, did you love him? Did you love him? I'm like, I think he took the wings off flies as a child. I mean, like, how his last boss was an asshole? I'm like, they're like, oh yeah, he was. I'm like, did he tell you about the one before that?
Same.
Right?
Same.
Did he tell you about how he was smarter than his grade school principal? You know who the next asshole boss is? In the mirror. Yeah. But hey, your team.
But I think the point of that, what we were whispering about, was that we were talking about, someone at the top making the call. And I agree that can maybe keep some integrity. But at the same time, the managers don't learn, right? They don't learn the difference between someone who's good and someone who's great. And they'll never learn that lesson. And if you let them learn it, it's not going to be catastrophic to the business. They'll never hire a bad person. Well, they may be, but they're less likely to, right? Because they've seen it, they know what it looks like, and they've gone through the pain of having to terminate that person and having to find somebody else. And those are just lessons that we don't always allow leaders to experience. And in order to become a good leader, you have to fail all the time. And I think,
and it's not, and that's a great example of like, that's not training.
no.
Unfortunately, right. I mean, you can send somebody to a class and they're going to be like, oh, you're not performing. Hang on a second. Let me just go look up that handbook from that class I took.
Of what to do.
Or
what do I do?
Conflict management. When you need conflict management, when you're in conflict.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not going to find the solution in that binder.
the other thing I think that's really important about making the leader's job to create leaders, right? So as you move up the management chain, I think that the most important things that you do, I always say a manager's job is to build great teams that do amazing work on time with quality, period. That's it.
Yep.
And if your team isn't doing amazing work on time with quality, then something's up. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's not, and you don't come to, I mean, and when they would come to us, I would say, you want some coaching on how to do that, or how can we think about that? Seems like, hey, look, we looked ahead at what we're doing next year, and I got to tell you, you've got a great team, but it's the wrong team.
Yeah.
It's not that they're not great.
Right.
And you did a great job. Like, how are you going to do that again for a different type of, and that's how.
Yeah. That's how they learn.
That's how you scale.
Yeah.
I was going to do a, career confessions thing to kind of stick in your podcast format, but
okay. Does anybody
I think
have
now
a career confession?
Oh, maybe we'll go to the audience.
Yeah.
I'm Shelby.
Shelby.
I've been in HR 20 years and I've made lots of mistakes. And I'm wondering what is like that one mistake that kept you up at night that like all of us could learn from?
I know mine.
Oh, you know yours?
It was pretty early in my career, and a gay employee complained that his manager had sexually harassed him on an offsite. And the manager was very, very, very important to the company at the time. And it was one of those, there's two sides to every story, right? And I believed the victim, and I got overruled, right? And so I did what I thought at the time was the right thing for the company. And look at my voice still breaks. It was the wrong thing to do. I should have held my ground, right? And it was a long time ago, and it was like never again, right? I didn't trust my own instincts, and the CFO that we had at Netflix, that he and I argued a lot one time. One time he came in, we argued all the time, not a lot, all the time. He came in one time and he goes, you're a diva. I'm like, really? I like that. You can say that to me more often. Why am I a diva? And he said, because every time you tell me you don't think this person is going to work out, they don't, right? Every time, you're always right about that. And so I think it's like this special intuition that you have. And I said, actually, we have the same gift. Yours is with numerals, mine is with people. And it's pattern recognition. And what I learned to do from that situation was trust my pattern recognition. I mean, I should have known that I knew he was lying. And then all I had to do is wait, and he did it again. Not harass somebody else, but lied about something.
So many mistakes, but I was trying to think about the ones that like haunted me. And it was when I didn't say anything, and because I was tired, or because I, just didn't want to, just didn't want to hear no or whatever. But it was those things that I could have influenced, and I could have changed, and I could have pushed. And because of whatever headwinds I was facing, from workload, from personal or whatever, you wimp out in those moments. And there's just those moments where maybe I wimped out, where I was like, well, I should have said something. And, eventually I did, but those were the ones that would like kind of stick with me.
God, that it's just sort of so. One time Reed wrote me this email, and it said something I had said, here's the situation. He's like, you're wrong. I don't believe you, blah, 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 blah. And he wrote me an email that said, the header was whatever the situation was. And he said, you were right and I was wrong.
Yeah.
I printed it and I kept it, in my wallet.
Yeah.
Like for those times when I was like, I was right. But a couple of years later, he came in and he's like, well, we did it again. You were right and I was wrong. And I said, it used to make me so happy when you said that. I mean, I would go home and go, I'm right and he's wrong. And now it makes me feel bad because why wasn't I able to influence you? Right? Why wasn't I able to, why didn't you listen to me? Right?
Yeah.
Was it that you don't trust me? Or, and that was I think it's the same kind of thing. It's the big learning. It's like, well, we were wrong in that somehow we didn't get heard. Right.
Yeah. And I think that is the challenge with this role is that, and you're pointing things out, especially to the CEO, founder, things that they don't want to know, things that they don't want to deal with, things that they don't want to hear. And, I have a similar conversation with Reed. It's like, when have I been wrong? He's like, you haven't. I just don't want to do it. It's like, got it.
Yeah, no.
Just tell me that then. Don't.
Yeah.
Don't.
Just, or the ones you guys have all had this one too, where they're like, well, that's not what I said. And you go, I learned to say, I know that. I was in the room. I know what you said. Let me tell you what they heard.
Yeah.
Right. I know totally where you're coming from. It makes total sense to your logical engineering brain. To a normal human,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, but I mean, I think that leaves us in a really great place, which is it's really important when in our jobs, when you're working with other leaders, particularly CEOs, you're the one person, right? You're it's really lonely. It's really scary. It's really hard being a CEO. And you got to be that one person they can trust. And how I found that you gain that trust is, you say, I know you don't want to hear this and you probably don't believe me and you're going to disagree with me, but I'm going to tell you anyway. And I remember Reed saying to me, note that I didn't ask. 4 years.
Yeah.
Right? Until he would come in and go, I'm about to do something I think you're going to get pissed off at me about. So I might as well tell you so that when you're pissed off, I can anticipate it. To, how should we think about this? Mm-hmm. Right? And so it takes years.
Yeah.
Of carpooling with your CEO to work.
I think there's a question. Hold on. We have to do, because
We're
it's recording. You have to be on the mic. Yeah. You're going to be on the podcast.
Uh-oh.
Hi, Heather Robert. I'm curious about your perspective on diversity when talking to leaders and executives these days. Obviously, a lot of companies have rolled back their perspective, and there's assumptions as to
We just did a podcast.
We did a podcast on this.
Why?
Yes,
we did a
you'll have to listen
podcast
to it.
on DEI.
Yeah.
and so I'm curious about even, and maybe you discussed this already, about your own perspective over the years on how that has changed with diversity. And then right now, if you're talking to executives, what you actually say to them.
Okay. So I think there is confusion around DEI and all of the things. And Patty and I talked on the podcast is like when things become an HR initiative, they're
It's
just
death.
sort of death. Like it's like, and so I think it became that. Now,
Well, and it became DEI and I, and I'm like, oh my God, if we add any more letters, I swear to God, I'm giving this up.
yeah. But, I think Patty and I believe this to be true. And I think what companies are saying is that they're rolling back DEI. I don't think if you talked to a founder that they would say like diversity doesn't matter, that, people being included in this workforce and doing great work doesn't matter. They're going to say that matters. But I think what happened was that there was sort of a surgence into this, and there was a lot of money put behind this and a lot of effort. And there were things like COVID and Black Lives Matter that, I think ignited a lot of this really good stuff. Now, not all of that stuff worked, right? And I think it's fair to go back and look at that and say, that's not moving the needle, but this is. Right. And this is good for our business. Right. So I think, unfortunately, with all the things happening in the world, it's become this like thing. But I don't believe that businesses and good businesses really think that it's not helpful. It absolutely is. If you want to build a great product and you want to have a product that resonates with your customers, it's got to look like your customers.
That's right. And I think that we didn't treat it like we could have treated it like a product, which is, wow, let's take a look at the demographics of the world, and we don't reflect our customer base. And let's take a look at the up and coming resources in terms of qualified people to work in our companies. We need everybody that we can get, right? We don't really care. We just want them to be great and right and all that kind of stuff. And if you don't ever give anybody a chance, they never get a chance.
Yeah.
Right? It's just period, end of story. If you don't get in the first door, you don't get in the top door.
Do you remember Iris Bonet, the researcher, Iris?
Oh God, she was so
She was so
interesting.
good.
She was a Harvard sociologist / data scientist.
And she was fantastic.
Yeah, she was.
But she has all this data about like how, diversity training doesn't work. It doesn't move the needle. Like, and it's not that it's not well intended, it's not good, but people go and like after the training, like maybe a half hour later, they can tell you what they learned, but 2 days later, a month later, they've forgotten it all. But she was like, hiring, does that move the needle?
Yes.
Yes. And so she had all this data and she spent years of her life, researching this stuff.
That's a really good podcast. She was so cool. She was like, she did this research where she looked at the circumstances surrounding women in the workforce in the 60s, 70s, 80s, right?
Oh, yeah.
Sort of through the
This is
decades.
fascinating.
And what was really fascinating to me was that the social circumstances around people's employment, like women could not move into, women always had to start as secretaries. Was that it?
No. It was they couldn't get 10s on the performance reviews.
Right.
Yeah. So so only men got 10s. Women could get 9s, but they could never get a 10.
Right.
And then one of her partners or whatever that she worked with, they changed the scale to be 6.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then all these women were getting 6s, but like just in our minds, men are so great. They're 10s.
Only a guy can be a
a
10.
woman could never be a 10. She can only be a 9.
But I think so I think what we learned about it was like we didn't treat DEI as a product that if it's going to fall to us to do it, do we set up objectives to start with? Did we say what we wanted out of it? Did we achieve our goals? Did it work?
Yeah.
Did it work? Right? That's so important to
And
the
so-
things that we do. Just because we think up some new HR initiative,
Yeah.
like how many HR initiatives have you been in companies where it's like, 3 years ago, remember our initiative was
Nobody cared.
nobody cared.
But in going back and talking to your business, that's what I would talk about. Like, let's talk about, let's get rid of the stuff that's not working. Let me tell you about the stuff that is. And let me tell you how it's making an impact on the bottom line. Okay? And if you can roll it back to this is impacting revenue, guess what? They're going to care about it.
Or anecdotally, right? Hey, somebody, for a long time at Netflix, I was honestly, I was like the first woman for a long time on the executive team for years, right? We hired somebody that was outside of the norm of who we normally hire, and they turned out to be really successful. And oh, by the way, they brought to the organization a perspective that we didn't have before. And if, let's take AI.
Yeah.
Who do we want to use AI? White people? No. I mean, we want it to be a tool that really helps us all as a society get better and learn more and learn faster and automate and make it interesting and curious and all those things. So like, who do we want to be involved in? Like one of the biggest issues that we all know that are involved in AI is like, what are the models pulling from? Right? Are they pulling from diverse data that represent lots of different kinds of people? Or are we going to get a perspective that basically tells us what we already know? And that was why she was a great example of like, both of us are like, yeah, and then what? Like,
Yeah. She was so good.
she was so good.
Iris. Iris.
Yeah, but so that's the beware of the HR initiative.
Yeah.
Beware.
And don't do them. Do things that matter, right? And there's probably a few things that matter. And
Teaching people, you already talked about it here today, teaching
Yeah.
people how to be great at hiring,
yeah,
right?
that
Teaching
matters.
people how to
Be
change
great,
the
be
organization.
great leaders. Have great one-on-ones.
Just be great.
Just be great.
be
Oh my
great.
God.
Oh my God.
Well, thank you both. This has been super fun. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to TruthWorks. This episode was produced by Megan Hayward. Thank you to Kathleen Speckert and the whole Edit Audio team.